Welcome to the prequel for Shots of Bliss Season 3. What's up, all blissful friends? Before I get into any of the topics or discussions that we're going to be discussing here in Shots of Bliss Season 3, I just want to give you guys a few quick updates on what to expect here in Season 3 of Shots of Bliss. First thing is, be sure to connect with us on social media. We'll be posting community events, community meetings, as well as for Season 3 here on Shots of Bliss, we'll be having a lot of collaborations and guests here on the show. Just have dialogue and discussion on everything about the bliss and the glory and the cross that we like to discuss here at Shots of Bliss. And finally, just want a quick announcement on our all-new website here at Shots of Bliss. Check us out at shotsofbliss.com. You can get cool merch like this shirt or this hat here on shotsofbliss.com. And also you can learn more about what we do here and what we're all about here at Shots of Bliss. Before we get into any of the topics that we're going to discuss here on Shots of Bliss Season 3, I just want to give a quick story that's really been on my heart, and a story that just gives a basic fundamental understanding of some things that we're going to discuss here on Shots of Bliss. And the story was like this. There was a farmer who had a horse, and one day the farmer's horse ran away. And all the neighbors came around and said to the farmer, "Oh, that's so sad, your horse ran away." And the farmer responded, "Maybe." The next morning, the farmer's horse returned with 7 other wild horses. And the neighbors had seen what had happened. And the neighbors went to the farmer and said, "Oh, this is wonderful. Your horse returned with 7 other wild horses for your farm." And the farmer responded, "Maybe." Later that evening, the farmer's son was attempting to tame one of the wild horses. And the farmer's son got bucked off the horse and fell off and broke his leg. The neighbors came around and seen what had happened. And they said, "Oh, this is so terrible. This is horrible what had happened to your son." And the farmer responded, "Maybe." The next morning, the conscription officers came around to recruit for the army. And they didn't recruit his son because he had the broken leg. And the neighbors came around and said, "Oh, this is wonderful. Your son doesn't have to go away from your farm to the army." And the farmer responded, "Maybe." You see, on the surface of the story, what is the story trying to tell us here on the surface? And that is that don't get too high or don't get too low based on the circumstances of what life brings. Life's circumstances are going to happen. You're going to have the ups and downs. But what we like to talk about here on Shots of Bliss is being consistent, staying content and staying blissful regardless of the high or lows of life. That's on the surface level. And ultimately, that comes from knowing that everything is going to be okay by trusting God. And that's what we're all about here at Shots of Bliss. But as I continued to meditate, the story kept popping up in my head. And I kept just meditating on the farmer's way of just saying maybe. Whether he was having something positive happen in his life, or whether it was something negative in a very tough circumstance. The farmer still stayed consistent with this maybe. So I just kind of kept meditating on this maybe and kept thinking about it, pondering, where does this maybe come from? And yes, it comes from a deeper place than just, being consistent and just surface level. It comes from a place deep within the farmer's being. He was digging deep, and within his being, he had this consistently, he had this rock. He had God to rely on. And where does that come from, How come some people are able to just stay consistent regardless of life circumstances like this farmer in this story? So as I continued to think about this and meditate on this, I found that it corresponded with a much deeper understanding of life. And it gives a basic understanding to something I've been studying and researching for quite some time. So what I discovered is that the farmer's state of this maybe gives a basic fundamental and basic understanding of the quantum world. Now, let me take a step back here and just give a broader picture of what quantum is. Here at Shots of Bliss, we've been referring to the heavenly world, the blissful world, the upper world, all those biblical terms. And what we're discovering now is that science is actually discovering something called the quantum world. And what I've been learning is that these two, heavenly world and the quantum world, they actually overlap in a lot of ideas and a lot of their behavior and the way they intervene into the physical world. So for a quick example, physical properties or physical particles or physical atoms in the physical world, they can be either 1 or 0. They could be either on or off. They could be yes or no. They could be one of two states, 1 or 0. It cannot be both. This limits physical properties to either be on or off, 1 or 0, okay? On the other hand, we have something called quantum particles, and they behave in a superposition or a bistate. And what does this mean? This means that quantum particles can be in both 1 or 0, yes and no, at the same time. And this means that quantum particles actually have unlimited, infinite possibilities when it comes to how they behave. There's an infinite number of possibilities. This reminds me of something that we've discussed here quite a lot on Shots of Bliss, the heavenly world, and how we said when you experience and when you're living a life out of this blissful state of the heavenly world, you're actually living a life of infinite possibilities, similar to how quantum particles we're finding through science and through research that quantum particles have an infinite number of possibilities. I mean, that just blows my mind. That just gets me ecstatic, and it's just like, wow, like physical properties are limited, but yet they are intervened by quantum particles, or what we like to call here in Shots of Bliss, the heavenly world. And when that happens, when the heavenly world or the quantum particles intervene into physical world, the possibilities become infinite, eternal possibilities. That's the heavenly world that we're talking about, my friends. So ultimately, science is defining this unseen world of superposition particles as the quantum world. And as we continue to make breakthroughs in the realm of quantum physics, we're discovering more and more the similarities between this quantum world and what the Bible has been calling the spiritual world for centuries. And some of the similarities here are the fact that they're both outside of the physical world and the physical limitations of time and space, but yet they both intervene into the physical world of this time and space quantum that we live in. And when they do, healings, miracles, and people have ecstatic experiences when the quantum or heavenly world intervenes into the physical world as we know it. This is where miracles happen. This is where healings happen. This is where, throughout biblical history and throughout, modern history, you find that miracles and healings and supernatural things. This is the realm of supernatural that we're getting at here as we continue to discover the quantum. So getting back to the story of the farmer, how was he able to stay in the state of maybe? Because he was rooted and founded in the quantum world that lives within him, in the heavenly world and the spiritual world that lives within him. He was able to stay rooted and grounded in that supernatural life. And when you're living life from this place, this quantum place of supernatural heavenly world, when you're living from that place, you can see things from outside of time and space. And when you see things, you see the beginning and the end, This is why God is referred to as the Alpha and the Omega, because he's outside of time and space. And you can see the beginning and the end. And when you live there, life circumstances don't have much effect on who you are as a being. Whether you have, the most greatest thing happen to your circumstances or the worst thing, it does not matter, because you're rooted and grounded in Jesus. You're rooted and grounded in the heavenly world, in the quantum, in what science is just now discovering as the quantum world. And so I'm just so fascinated by this quantum world that science is discovering, and how it's amazing how many things are overlapping between these two, and just the way the quantum particles behave, and how it so correlates with what I've experienced in the spiritual world, in the heavenly world, with Jesus, and just experiencing that bliss, just those correlations and the merging and the way they just overlap so much in their behaviors, and the way they, intervene in a life and cause miracles and healings, and just supernatural things are coming of it. So I'm excited about science's and physics' new discoveries of quantum physics and the quantum world. I'm constantly researching new quantum things, and that's going to be a lot of the topics and discussions that we have here for season 3 of Shots of Bliss. It's just what is this quantum world and how does it relate to the bliss of the cross of Jesus Christ, and how does it relate to what mystics and saints throughout history and throughout the Bible have experienced as the heavenly world. So we're going to dig more into that mergence of the quantum and the heavenly life of bliss here on season 3 of Shots of Bliss. So stay tuned. Be sure to stay connected with us across social media platforms, and be sure once again to check us out on our new website, shotsofbliss.com. Get some cool merch and just check us out, learn more about us. Again, shotsofbliss.com. That's all I have here for the prequel of Shots of Bliss Season 3. Stay on the lookout for all new content on the quantum and heavenly life that we'll be experiencing here on Shots of Bliss. And finally, as always, stay blissful, my friends.
Lord, to the heavens, I'm already in the clouds, so high I ain't coming down, no. They say, Lord, to the heavens, I'm already in the